Hi people and hello my Chili Con Carnage crew, it is Chili here from Live Listen Erased, and I'm bringing you an episode of Worst to Best, as you can tell by the title, of Machine Head. And the inspiration for this actually came from a panel that I was a part of on the Chilled Dude on the Couch, and Hector, to make sure to check out his channel. Basically, we discussed their first album, Burn My Eyes, and it was an album that I wanted to raise with him, saying, is it that bad? Because I know it gets a lot of praise amongst the people. And for me, I've got a view on it, and I really recommend that you should go and check out the episode, of course, after this one, to go into the in-depth analysis on that one. But basically, I wanted to go over it because, in preparation for that episode, I listened to a lot of Machine Head from their, all their albums, pretty much, and said, man, I forgot how damn good they can be. But then there's not all good albums in there, is there? So, this album is my ranking of Machine Head's albums ranked from worst to best. Let's get into this. At the bottom of the list, and perhaps to no one's surprise, is Supercharger. For me, this is an album that I've never listened to in full, and I never plan to. There's just nothing in this album that is going for me. I've gone through the track list here, and I've gone, okay, I don't really recognize any of these names from any kind of compilations, whether it be like best ofs or songs that people have mentioned, any kind of conversation whatsoever. I think I played the first 3 tracks from this album, and that's about it. Bulldozer, that's a good track. That's actually a good track. But the rest of it so far, the Declaration of White Knuckle Blackout, yeah, I just don't really care for this. And a lot of people have been saying on the internet, this is one of the worst albums. They're not saying it was, because yeah, that'll be the next slot, but still, people are saying, yeah, this is one of their weakest efforts, and it shows a problem in the band, because this album, what was it, something like their 4th record, I think, and this point in the band's career, they're showing off that they had a knack, and then they started changing it up a bit and angered a bit of the fans, and it kind of showed a band that was a bit of a hit and miss, I guess. And this continues even to this day. So yeah, Supercharger, not an album that I enjoy, at the bottom of my list, purely because I just haven't listened to the entire thing, and I don't care to. I'm sure people will come out and say, oh, well, yeah, listen to American High or Crashing Around You. They're good tracks, but just don't. Yeah, I don't care. This is just a weak looking album. I don't want to. So it's at the bottom of my list, everyone. And of course, their second worst album is Catharsis. Yeah, surprise, surprise. Yeah, this was a terrible album. 2018 was an interesting time to be a Machine Head fan, because they had just come off the success of quite a few good albums, and looking back in their catalogue, these albums will come up much, much later. And, when Machine Head had announced their new album was coming out, Catharsis, and led with that single, Volatile, which was a strong track from this record. I'm thinking, yeah, this is good. This is a good track. We're going to have that Machine Head sound again. It's going to be a good record. And then the album dropped, and I think Beyond the Pale was the second single release from it, and I was like, what's going on here? I don't like this sound. And that's where everyone suddenly irked up and said, well, okay, what are you doing, Machine Head? Stop it, Machine Head. Don't do that, Machine Head. Unfortunately, they did. They did a 15-track album. And this is one of the other big problems as well. When I said that the band were hit and miss, this is where they show their head as being a miss. They have got some great albums in their career, and then they mar it by going, alright, we're going to shift it gears again. And Catharsis was that. From the years prior, Machine Head had just gone down to no-nonsense thrash, heavy metal, whatever you want to call it. And then they kind of jumped back a gear and said, alright, we're going to reintroduce like rap sections and stuff like this, and slow it down and do these other things. It was unnecessary. I get that you want to change and do something a little bit different to your last couple of releases here, but it was such a bad angle and a bad push that even the band members themselves said, yeah, I'm quitting the band. Probably, I think it was like a year or so after. Not even. I think it was during that year actually. What was it? Two of the members left, I think, at nearly the same time. They just said, "Yeah, I'm out. I don't like the angle that we're taking with this new Catharsis look," and yep, they up and quit. And then even the news outlets jumped in and said, "Yeah, Machine Head's doing like a final tour because they're going to disband because they had a terrible tour name. I think it was called The End of the Line or something like that. The End of the Line tour, or The End of an Era. That's what it was. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, Rob Flynn came out and he's like, no. This is as in the end of an era, as in the lineup that we have, not the band itself, which will continue. So, yeah, I was a bit upset when I heard that news initially pressed, and I was like, oh my god, Machine Head's breaking up. No! Luckily, that wasn't the case. But yeah, Catharsis, it just suffers a lot from just being too long-winded, too many tracks on this record, too much crap is going on here. You could cut half of this album out and it still sounds terrible. It's just too much on here, and unfortunately, yeah, the whole album just suffers. I like the album artwork though. The album artwork, pretty solid looking album artwork there. There's a lot going on. Volatile, solid track. Unfortunately, didn't carry on too much. Bastards was a good one as well. I didn't mind that one. Bastards was alright. But yeah. Catharsis, yuck. Get rid of that. I don't think I've listened to that since it came out, to be honest. Next up on my list is going to be The More Things Change, the second album from the band. And yeah, this album, it's a bit overlooked because of obviously their debut album and how much that is talked about. And there are some really good tracks on offer from the start, right from the start. 10 Ton Hammer and Tape My Scars, absolutely great tracks. And then it kind of marches on a bit with a few of the tracks. They're not solid. I think they're slipping gears, I guess. Bay of Pigs was a good track, I thought, in there. But The More Things Change, it's such an overlooked album. And I know a lot of people who really love this album will defend it rigorously because, yeah, look, it's kind of deserved with its efforts. But it gets overlooked for a very good reason as well. It's not a solid album compared to their first one, and to me, the rest of the catalog, of course. So this is where it sits. It's unfortunately forgettable for probably the wrong reasons. Catharsis, yeah, you can forget that for very bad reasons and remember it, unfortunately. You can say the same about Supercharger. It's a very dull record that the band really, well, everyone hates. And yeah, so then unfortunately with The More Things Change, it was just this tall order to, come across, okay, we've done Burn My Eyes, we've waited 3 years to release our Sophomore album, and it was just a tall order to follow. Unfortunately, they just didn't follow it up too well. It happens. It does. But still, it's a decent album. Like, from here out, basically, these are good albums that you can listen to. I'm not going to say that you shouldn't listen to this album. I'm just saying that you could probably just take a couple of highlights from here and be done with it. That's what I'd be aiming at for. Yep, that's right. Burn My Eyes is this low on my list. I just think it's such an overrated album. There are a lot of people that will defend this record as one of their finest albums that ever put out. To me, it's a good album. It is. There's no denying that there are some absolute bangers on here, but there's also a lot of things that the band get wrong, do a few missteps here and there, and drag that beat on other parts. It's a band that's in its infancy, trying out some things here, and you can hear it on the record. It's not a great quality record, as in for production-wise and stuff like that, but it's still not a terrible sounding record compared to many other debut albums of this era. In fact, I think it's actually one of the best debut albums you'll find of this era. But that's regardless, there's just a lot of things that they get right and a lot of things that they get wrong. Again, we covered this in the episode with Hector, Chill Dude on the Couch. Make sure to go check that out. We covered it in very much depth. So I'm just going to run this through very quickly. You can check that one out. But the first couple of tracks, awesome. You've got Davidon, Old, and 1,000 Lies. Really cool tracks here. And when you go on, it just kind of, yeah, again, it's like that over the hill moment when you go through those first couple of tracks, and blood for blood, God now, realize. That's the song that really irks me, because it's the band trying to be Ministry, and yeah, I get it. You're a young band. You want to try and be your favorite musicians. You want to emulate their style. You want to do these things, but it doesn't work out too well, unfortunately, does it? Because Machine Head's not going to be Ministry. They never were going to be following that industrial section, were they? And obviously they were trying to do something, and I get it. It's just that it didn't work out. And I guess if you have a listen to, there's a live recording of this album. Actually, the band re-recorded the entire album, Burn My Eyes, live in 2019, I think it was. It might be, yeah, 2019. And of course, they left Realize off. Now, the Burn My Eyes live version, to me, is a better record in most of the tracks, not all. For example, I think the 1,000 Lies track is better on the studio version compared to their live version. That's just me. But there's really cool things, like, there's the banter between tracks on the live version. There's all the talks and stuff like that. The mid sections, it just sounds better as well. The production quality and stuff. And it really captures, I guess, the band in their element. And I think there's a lot on that live version that I prefer over the studio version, which is like this real young sounding band here. So, yeah, I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. But I think that this is probably their most overrated works. And yes, I rank it this low because this is my list. And I'm sure a lot of people are pissed off and writing comments right now saying, why? Why have you committed such a travesty of a Machine Head? Because I can. This is my list. Initially, when I made this list, this album was sitting one spot below. But when I went and revisited Through the Ashes of Empires, I was blown away because I don't remember it being so good. To be honest, actually, I don't think I ever played the full album up until very recently. And it's one of these, it's a sleeper album. It is very much a sleeper album. It doesn't get the love that a lot of the previous records have already, got, for example, with Burn My Eyes. And it's a bit unfortunate. There is just so much going on here that is so good. With Imperium and Bite the Bullet and Left Unfinished, these 3 songs start off the album that are very awesome. And it kind of flows on to some good tracks afterwards. Elegy and In the Presence of My Enemies, not too bad. I did find, though, what was the track that I was thinking of? I can't recall it now. It might be Days Turn Blue to Grey or Vim. I can't remember. It was the heroin song or the song talking about drugs. I found that a bit too much. I'm pretty sure that was Days Turn Blue to Grey. Pretty sure that was the track. The opening part of it, anyway, is just like, yeah, get on with it. It's got this weird intro, and I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, shut up. Move on to the song, and it was a bit much. But yeah, when the song did hit, it was like, oh, okay, damn, now we're on, people. We are on. Yeah, so that was a bit of a surprise, I guess. But then there's all these like sleeper songs in the last half of the album that don't get the love that they deserve. Descend the Shades of Night, the last track on the album. It's like this weird hidden last song. You're like, oh my god, what did I just listen to? That thing is brutal. And it, to me, like I said, this album was one spot lower until I revisited it, and I went, okay, this is actually a really strong album that I just didn't really give much attention to back in the day. So now I'm giving its, due. Now I'm paying its due here by raising it above Burn My Eyes. Yeah, fight me. Hey, this is my list. What can I say? Through the Ashes hit me, and I loved it. There were like, I'm not going to say there weren't faulty parts of this album. There definitely were. But I just think that it's a better album overall. The production is much better. The tracks, not all of them are just crap compared to Burn My Eyes or, The More Things Change, which are forgettable. There's just more solid music coming out of the band there. Great tunes. So, for me, this is where it's at. Of Kingdom and Crown is the next one on the list here for Machine Head albums. And you know what? When they released Catharsis, it was a terrible backstep. It was just terrible to go over that album. So when they had news that, you know, we were releasing a new album and it was going to be that COVID era recording, yeah, it was a bit, I don't know how I felt at the time, because there was a lot of music coming out from a lot of bands, you know, that we were stuck in lockdown and we're recording, and Machine Head had announced, yeah, we've got a record coming out too. I'm thinking to myself, okay, but a lot of the members, they're not there anymore, so how is this going to sound? And I was very cautious, you know, I'm thinking, is this going to be another return to Catharsis? Are they going to take another bad step here? Because I don't know. And I did a 5-minute review on this album as well. You can check that out for my details on that one. But Of Kingdom and Crown was really good return to form. Not going to say it was a perfect return to form. I think it's a great step towards their true sound, I suppose. But, you know, it's a very good album with 13 tracks on here for the mix. It's a very long, it feels like a long record anyway. When you begin with a 10-minute track, Slaughter the Martyr, I mean, damn, that's one way to start off a record, isn't it? And a great tune to kick it off as well. I do love their longer tracks, and Slaughter the Martyr I thought was one of the better ones. I just didn't understand the whole every single O has a cross through it thing. What is that, Norwegian, I think? I don't know, it could be some Scandinavian thing. But still, you know, there was some great tunes here. Arrows in Words from the Sky was another one. I'm pretty sure I did a video reaction to as well, and was a great tune. Choke on the Ashes of Your Hate, you know, Become the Firestorm. All of these tracks are just great, and there's like this, I think there's a story behind it as well, because, you know, you have Overdose, which is another track, and My Hands Are Empty, which does feel like it follows on to that, and Unhollowed. I'm pretty sure there's a little conceptual work going on behind the scenes, but still, Of Kingdom and Crown is a very strong album by the band, and a great return to show that, hey, you know, while we have some new members in the fold, they're still kicking ass, and hell, we're not going anywhere. Fantastic return to form, and that's why it sits this high on my list. The Burning Red is the next album for me, and I'm sure that this will be a very controversial pick, because I know a lot of people do not like this album. And yeah, look, I can understand when you go with the starting track Desire to Fire, I can understand that sentiment. But for me, this was one of my first, you know, Machine Head albums. I think it was actually my first Machine Head album, so that might explain a lot as to why I really love this album. So when you're going over it, 12 tracks excluding the first one, so 11, you know, there's a decent enough run time at 50 odd minutes. And there's also, for me anyway, Message in a Bottle, which is a really awesome cover. I love that track. I remember I got my hands on it way back in the day, and I think I played it like 27 times in a row. I'm not even joking. This is when you could, you know, have Media Player and it told you your play count of various tracks. I listened to Machine Head's version, Message in a Bottle, 27 times in a row. That thing is ingrained in my brain forever. I just love that build up right towards the end when they're blasting it and just going through those final choruses. It's really awesome. So look, if you're going red about this choice at the end of the day because Desire to Fire is a terrible song, skip it. I dare you to skip this track and keep going, because there is a lot of great tracks. In fact, what I would probably go for is aiming towards the last couple of tracks instead, you know, because I think the last couple of tracks on this album are extremely undervalued. You know, when you got tracks like 5, I Defy, and The Burning Red was a pretty cool little, it's an interesting outro, I like it. But 5 in particular, extremely dark tune with its lyrics and stuff like that. And I love The Blood, the Sweat, the Tears. It's just this simple pump up tune. I love it. It's such a great tune. From This Day, Silver, but you know, Nothing Left is another cool tune as well. But at the end of the day, there is a lot on this album that gets overlooked a lot. So maybe I implore you, go over this album, listen to, you know, the last 4 tracks, Devil with the King's Card. Start from there and play out, and then play the rest of the album. Skip over Desire to Fire if you don't like it, because at the end of the day, there is a lot of good tracks on here that I really love. And look, I guess one of the other reasons it's so high is because, again, it was my first Machine Head album, you know, and I got a lot of fun memories when it comes to this record. So, hey, this is what my list is, so that's where it is. Unto the Locust is the next one up. What a time to be alive during this Machine Head era. I think it's probably going to be their pinnacle, you know, this time frame of the band. And I remember I was getting really into Machine Head about this point. You know, Unto the Locust came out. I ran out and bought that CD. And I've got it somewhere, I just don't know where. But still, this is a gruesome looking album artwork. When you're looking at it, it's just so dirty. Look at this graphic here. It's so weird. Look at that locust look. The semi-human locust looking thing is obscure, dirty, ugly, but it's like this record as well. The fantastic opening track, I Am Hell Sonata in C major, C sharp, sorry, I think it is just one way to kick this album off. I love that intro with all the vocal harmonies at the beginning, you know, Sata, oh Sata, you know, whatever it is. And then it just kicks into that guitar riff. I am hell. Fucking amazing tune, that one. You know, and when I saw this thing and I was like, oh man, 7 tracks, okay, this is a short album. It is, it's only 48 minutes. It doesn't, and this is the thing, it is short and it's perfect for its runtime. There is no dead air. It's like 7 tracks of perfection just slammed up into this record. They probably had a bunch of other songs that they cut off, and I'm glad if they did, because all that is needed is available on this one. You know, you go from I Am Hell, you jump into Be Still and No, fantastic swing, and Locust, wow. Of course, you go on to This Is the End, Darkness Within, Pearls Before Swine, fantastic track, and Who We Are. A great closer, very high energy. This is who we are, you know, and I can imagine just being on that tour and just hearing that. That's got to be like one of the closing tracks they would have done, because that is one epic way to close out an album. Unto the Locust, people. It's just perfection, almost. It's such a good record. I think it is a really solid effort, and I loved Machine Head when I was listening to this era, man. This is such peak Machine Head right here. Bloodstone and Diamonds is the next one up for me, and of course the band were going through this amazing time in their career. They just came off the back of 2 incredible albums. Unto the Locust, phenomenal effort there, but I didn't think that they were going to be able to surpass that. But needless to say, Bloodstone and Diamonds came out with this album artwork that I thought that was a bit average. You know, you're looking at this kind of weird graphic here. It's got that Supercharger kind of logo in the middle as well, and this imperial-ish kind of, I don't know, logo at the corner. And I'm like, yeah, look, I don't mind it. It looks kind of cool. It's like a crest or something of Machine Head. And the colouring is just this sepia toned thing, whatever. But of course, we are talking about the vast improvements of so many tracks. There is so much music going on. For an album with 12 tracks that goes over like 70 minutes in runtime, there's barely any dead air in here. I love it. There is so much going on and so many anthemic tunes that I love it. I mean, we kick off things with Now We Die, absolutely killer track. Killers and Kings, absolutely amazing follow-up. Ghosts Will Haunt My Bones, Night of the Long Knives, a track that I thought that was originally about the Germans during World War II, because I thought, wasn't that, I think in history, wasn't that called The Night of the Long Knives? I'm pretty sure it is, but obviously when you're listening to the lyrics, it's not. It's about Charles Manson. So, yeah, very, very different tune. You know, you got Sail Into the Black, again, follows on so seamlessly here. Eyes of the Dead. You might go a little bit off mark here with Beneath the Silt, but you come back with In Comes the Flood. You know, there's as I said, there's 12 tracks and they flow so perfectly here. It's great production, great songwriting, great catch, great riffs, drumming's on point, everything. It just flows so perfectly. You know, the end of like 3 perfect records here. Bloodstone and Diamonds was a great way to, I guess, close out this band. If only the band members who had chosen to leave after Catharsis did so instead after Bloodstone and Diamonds, you could actually excuse that album as, it's a bunch of new musicians coming in the fold. No, that's unfortunate, but still we know where that album sits at the end of the day. I have to give a massive shout out, of course, to Game Over, one of the greatest tunes to come out around about this era. It's such a wicked, it's just that Game Over riff, that Game Over, fucking amazing riff right there, and I love it. Another one as well that came out around about a few years after and before Catharsis as well. I want to give a shout out to the track, the single, Is There Anybody Out There? Fantastic little single. Don't know if that was some kind of B-side or track that was left off the record. Regardless, I want to just give a quick shout out while I'm here of Is There Anybody Out There? An amazing track. So yeah, this one sits up in the second position for me. And of course that leaves So, number 1 for me was always going to be The Blackening. In fact, to probably most fans of the band, The Blackening is their number 1 album. It is the band's magnum opus. It is their best effort ever to date, and will probably remain that way, unfortunately. But we can only hope that the band try to aspire to be the next of The Blackening for whatever album they release next. Now, the story goes that when they went into the recording studio for their next album, they wanted to create something that was a timeless masterpiece, something that would transcend and go on forever and be one of these records that just was phenomenally awesome, epic, and everything else that you can always put words to and say, this is such a grand album, I love it, They wanted to essentially create their version of Master of Puppets. That was what they said to themselves when they walked into that recording studio. We're going to create our Master of Puppets, an album that will last decades, be always in the public zeitgeist. And they achieved it. Damn, did they achieve it. This was my first record. Sorry, this is not my first record. This was my second record for Machine Head. But there is an odd story because actually I borrowed this from my local library. And damn, what a record to be putting out there. Like, hey, we're at the local library, you can borrow whatever you want. And, well, here's this record, this weird little artwork here. And I'm like, what is this? I know Machine Head, but I don't know this weird little artwork. What's the deal here? Borrowed this CD, and it was, of course, the version with 2 covers at the end of the album. We're talking about Hallowed Be Thy Name, the Iron Maiden track, and Battery, Metallica, which for me was just a great way to close out the album because I love Metallica. And to hear it being done by another band, and a bit more of a heavier band, you could say, is just a different level. Now, we begin off with the song Clenching the Fist of Dissent, and way sick tune to start this. You begin off with the tune Clenching the Fist of Dissent, which is a great way to start off this album. And of course, you follow this with Beautiful Morning and Aesthetics of Hate. What an angry tune. There is so much anger within 6.5 minutes on this. And of course, it's written about Dimebag Darrell and a writer who pretty much just said, kind of deserved to get shot. Yeah, I know, what a fucking idiot. Anyway, Aesthetics of Hate was his, I guess, tribute to him, and at the same time, it was just this angry piece about this asshole who wrote such a piece after him. I plan to actually cover this for a retro review, so I'll go in more in depth later on, but, then you follow on with Now I Lay Thee Down, Slanderous, Halo, and Wolves, as well as A Farewell to Arms. I think that's a Ernest Hemingway novel as well. So, just another great track, and, these are technically the only tracks, not including the bonus ones, but, it starts off and ends with 2 10-minute tracks. Wow. And there is nothing bad on this record. Phenomenally epic tunes, an hour long, and wow, what a way to just do themselves right. the start of Machine Head's new era, one that would go for a couple of albums with Locust, great way to follow it up, and of course Bloodstones and Diamonds, another great tune from them, another great album I should say. But the Blackening is where it all starts, and for me it was really my first real foray into Machine Head, and that really said to me, alright, I'm going to do a deep dive on this band. Sure enough, I even got another record of theirs shortly after this from the library as well, which was Burn My Eyes. So I'm sure that someone at my local library was a metalhead and said, alright, I'm going to put out some good music into the universe. And, well, hey, if you're watching this channel and you're wondering, that's who you've influenced. You've influenced a person like me. Congratulations for doing so. And I've got plenty of stories as well in regards to that same library. And that'll be up on my Rammstein list, so that'll be an interesting one to hear. Trust me, it's a funny story. So, yeah, that is it. This is my number one album, unsurprisingly, for Machine Head. So that does it for this list. Machine Head albums ranked worst to best. And I hope that you guys liked it out there. As always, people, make sure to comment below and write your list. What would you rank their albums from worst to best? Pop a comment below. As always, people, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the socials and all that stuff. And always, have a great day and stay spicy. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to us, and stay notified for future music-related content because it keeps our manager happy at the end of the day. We are also on Discord, Instagram, Facebook, and all those other social platforms if you want to check us out. As always, people, you have a great day and stay spicy.